Hello, 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 beautiful and amazing people. What's up, wealthy trustees? I'm excited and I'm lit to see you guys. So today we are going to have a master class. So we're going to dive right in so that we can get these gems. So the person who's coming on, our guest speaker, is one of our educators. His name is Mr. Dorsey, and he is the CEO of the Funding Playbook. Okay. So he has been doing this for over a decade. He has the best relationships with these banks, so he could walk you right in so that you're able to get the money that you need to acquire those assets. So get the funding that you need. Don't use your own money. So today we're going to be talking about OPM, other people's money, which is the bank's money. So the bank is using your money in order to get rich. So you need to use their money in order to get rich. So Mr. Dorsey is about to teach you that. So I have the pleasure and honor, it's always an honor when he comes and bless us and pours into the community. So I have the honor of introducing him. So thank you so much, Mr. Dorsey, for being here because I know everyone needs this information and all the gems that you're about to drop.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good morning, good morning. Can you hear
Good
me?
morning.
Actually, good afternoon now. Three
Good
minutes into the
afternoon.
afternoon. All right. Happy New Year. First time
Happy
being back,
New Year.
start of the new year. So, before we get started, right, I'm an energy person. So, I see a number of people here. I just want to make sure that we're all alert, we're all here, and we are ready to receive this information that we are about to go over. So, if you're awake, if you're here, if you're paying attention, I just want a little count. Do me a favor, drop some ones in the chat and let me know you are ready, you are alert, and you are ready to go. There we go. I see a couple ones. I see a couple ones. All right, all right, all right. Perfect. Awesome, awesome. So, my name is Mr. Dorsey. Thank you, Christina, in 7 ways. As always, I've been here for a while. I bring a lot of content. We talk a lot about just like she said, all about OPM, leveraging other people's money in order to grow your business, right? So that's what we are going to go over all of today. Now, let me preface this. We're going to go over a lot of information the next like 45 minutes, maybe an hour or so, right? So understand at the end, we will leave some time for Q&A. Some of you, this may be your first time hearing it. Some of you may be doing funding already. Some of you maybe have gotten, funded actually funded yourself. So we're going to cover a wide range. I don't want to make any assumptions about where anybody is. So we're going to start at the very bottom and we're going to work our way all the way to the top. So I say all that to say, if you have questions, if you have certain things as we go through this, please just write those down. And at the end, we will open time so that we can cover all of that. Now, I am a visual person, so I am going to share my screen. And if someone will do me a favor, let me pull it up. If someone will do me a favor and just drop a 2 in the chat, if you can see my screen, you should see where it says Business Funding Masterclass. There we go. Two. Awesome, awesome. So just like Christina said, we're going to go over the Business Funding Masterclass. I'm going to teach you all about leveraging and accessing capital and how to put yourself in a position to access capital. Right now, this is the masterclass. Understand, this is trusted by bankers. This is a duplicatable process. We have been doing this for a long time, right? We have a lot of relationships with pretty much every bank you can think of, from national banks, credit unions, regional banks, alternative lenders, right? We have a lot of conversations. The reason that's important is because this industry evolves, and it's important that you have those relationships so that way you can access the information and actually understand what banks are looking for. The other thing I want to preface this, right, is that understand I'm going to be teaching you how to put yourself in the position to go and get access to capital from banks. So as we go through this, one thing I want to clarify, lenders are and banks are in the business of lending you money, right? That is what the whole purpose of the business is to do. We just have to understand how to actually position ourselves in order to get the capital that we're looking for, right? Now, as we go through this, I do have a slight disclaimer. I've been doing this almost a decade, full-time since 2017. We have seen a lot of deals, right? We've worked with thousands of entrepreneurs, probably tens of thousands at this point. We funded tens of millions of dollars in capital. The reason I say that is because out of all my years doing this, I have never seen two deals the same. So understand, this is great general information. However, it is important to understand that everyone's situation is different. So although this is great general information, it's important that you consult with a qualified financial professional to get a plan catered to your specific situation, right? So that's very, very important. Now, following these, this is not legal or financial advice to your specific situation. This is general to understand how to actually put yourself in position. Now, it's also important, anytime in funding, we can never guarantee results. We can just teach you how to actually position yourself for highest probability applications, right? Now, with all of that out of the way, we are going to actually break down, how do you put yourself in position to go and get access to capital? Whether you're looking for 10,000, whether you're looking for 50,000, whether you're looking for $100,000 plus, right? Now, before we begin, I want to cover a couple things. If this feels overwhelming, that is normal, right? It's understandable. Sometimes we talk about credit, sometimes we talk about banking, and people may assume that this is an overcomplicated, really complex process, right? And sometimes when you look at it from the outside, it absolutely can see that way. But today, we're going to break this down step by step. We're going to make it applicable, relatable, and by the end of this, you should understand exactly where you are and what your first steps to get funded are, right? So it's perfectly okay if you feel overwhelmed today. If you have a lot of questions, that's fine, that's normal. That's why you are here today, is to get a step-by-step game plan, right? Number two, you don't need to be an expert. All you have to do is just follow this process with me. So we talk a lot about OPM, other people's money, but right now we're going to talk about OPE, other people's experience. You don't have to be the expert. You just have to follow someone who is an expert at what they do, right? So you don't have to be the expert today. I'm going to give you a lot of information that took me years of trial and error in order to figure out. So it's just important to me that you take note of this and that you actually follow this process with me, right? Number three, when we talk in funding, just how I talked about a second ago, we can speak in terms of ranges and we cannot give specific guarantees. We're going to use pre-qualified as a term to determine what you could potentially qualify for, right? So we're going to use that. And then we're going to, again, this is applicable information. By the end of this call, the next 45 minutes to an hour, I want you to be able to take your first steps to get funded, whatever that case may be, right? So we're going to give you practical examples that you can actually apply immediately, right? All right. Now, what are you going to learn today? This is what you're going to learn. You're going to learn four very important things. You're going to learn how the banks actually judge risk. Number two, how to fix profile red flags whenever you're looking for access to capital. We're going to talk about credit on both the personal side and also the business side, and how to find those profiles and fix those profiles to put yourself in position so that you can access capital. Number three, very, very important, because this is a strategic process. Nothing about this is random. So you're going to learn how to actually time and order the applications that you are submitting. And number four, like I said, we're going to talk about the first steps to get you funded today. Now, before I take any portion of your time, some of you may have heard of me before, some of you, this may be your first time, right? So I just want to give you a slight introduction to who I am. You can find me at CEO Dorsey on all platforms. And again, I'm going to tell you from experience. I'm not going to tell you something I think is possible. I'm going to tell you something that we do every single day, right? So just a slight understanding for who I am and why I'm even worthy of any portion of your time, because I do respect your time so much and I want to provide a lot of value, right? So I'm an expert in credit and funding. I have extensive experience in creating tailored funding solutions for entrepreneurs and businesses. Keyword here, tailored. There is no one size fits all funding strategy for everyone looking for funding, right? It's tailored, just like I said in the beginning, to your specific situation, to your specific circumstances, right? Number two, I'm a business growth specialist. I manage a 7-figure consultancy, ultimately where we streamline the process for funding, for asset acquisition and long-term success by knowing how to position yourself to access capital. And number three, I am a skilled negotiator. I am skilled in structuring deals with partnerships, investors, banks, and lenders, right? So we're going to talk about all of that. If you do want to see some of my content, I talk about a lot about credit, business, acquisitions, all of that over at CEO Dorsey on all platforms. Now let's get into why you're here. Now, the first thing to understand is just kind of how I talked about in the beginning. The banks and the lenders are already there to lend money. We just have to know how to actually position ourselves to go and get money from the bank, right? So it's important that you need to understand to think like a bank, right? We can't think like an outsider. We have to think like an actual bank and understand how are they underwriting and how are they actually qualifying people for capital, right? First thing to understand here, I know you have great ideas, right? I have a lot of conversation with business owners all the time. I hear some of the best ideas. I hear some of the best products. I hear a lot of great things, right? However, it's important to understand, as great as these ideas are, as much potential as it has, banks only fund based on predictability. They do not fund potential, right? So it's very important to understand that. Now, what does predictability mean whenever you're talking to banks? It means verifiable history, having some history, the accuracy of your information, and the correct organization of your information. When you combine these three things together, that's what helps the bank understand predictability when they are looking to lend or loan you money. Now, just kind of how I talked about a second ago, most people in businesses do not get denied because they don't have potential. A lot of businesses have potential, right? However, they get denied simply because they don't understand the game that they're playing, right? So we're going to answer a couple questions. They don't understand what actually makes a credit report fundable, both on the personal credit side and the business credit side, right? Number two, just because you have a business and it's legally established on paper, that doesn't necessarily make the business lendable. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what business structure is actually going to make the business look trustworthy and lendable to the bank? And last, what do banks actually look for when they're looking to lend 5, 6, or plus figures, right? So these are the things that we're going to cover today. And I'm going to walk you through a couple key components, how to create predictable outcomes whenever you are applying at the bank. I'm going to mention this a couple times. A lot of people, whenever we talk about funding, they think funding is only submitting applications, right? That is false. The work when you are looking for funding is done completely before that application is ever submitted, right? So it's very, very important that we do understand that. Now, the next thing, because a question I get a lot, hey, Dorsey, I love funding. I love that you talk about access to capital, but how can I actually use it, right? So there's a couple things that we look at and a couple things that our clients use access to capital for, right? And we always want to look at leveraging capital or other people's money to invest into growth and cash flow, right? We want to take leverage and be able to leverage that to our benefit, right? To our organization benefit. So here's some examples of some things that some of our clients and we use access to capital and other people's money for, right? So number one, marketing that actually brings clients. So if you have a business already, if you have a product already, if you have a service already, now access to capital can give you the leverage so that you can actually invest into marketing to promote your products and services so that it could potentially bring you more clients, right? Number two, systems and staffing. Maybe you already have a business. Your business is growing. Your business has traction. You're moving products. You've got clients, right? But now you need to bring on some help. You need to systemize some things so that you can actually scale your business, right? Number three, real assets. So using other people's money to actually go out and purchase assets.
It ain't
Some
on out
things
here.
like real estate.
It's not on out here.
Some things like real estate. Some things like stocks, or one of my personal favorite, actually using other people's money to acquire other businesses. And number four, things just like you are here for today, investing into education, into masterminds, and mentorships that actually sharpen your skills and also expand your network. So the reality here, and this is what we look at when you're looking at raising capital or accessing capital, is being able to imagine yourself acquiring assets, hiring a team, scaling a business, all without draining your savings, your personal savings, or worse, what I see a lot of business owners do, maxing out their personal credit cards in order to grow their business, right? We're going to help you understand how to actually solve these things today. Now, let's move on to the next portion. So let's understand predictability and what predictability actually means when you're going through this process. So let's create a visual. Two borrowers are going to walk into a bank, right? Borrower one, you got borrower one and you got borrower number two, right? Borrower number one, they walk in, their payment history, they've got some recent late payments, their utilization, their cards are almost maxed out or near the limits. When you look at profile alignment, their addresses don't match. You don't see the same address every time. The use of funds, there's really no clear plan. They just like the idea of accessing other people's money, but they don't really have a plan in order to use it, right? Documents, when they're asked for documents, they're scattered, they're incomplete, they're inconsistent. And the result of this is that the file looks uncertain, right? Now, on the flip side, let's look at borrower number two. Borrower number two walks in and their payment history, they're on time. They've got a history of keeping up with their payments, right? Their utilization, and we're going to talk about these targets a little bit later because the data points to position yourself for funding is important. So their utilization is between 1 and 29% utilization. Their profile alignment, when you look at their information, their name matches, their address matches, they look stable. Use of funds, they want to invest into things just like we talked about a second ago, using the funds for growth focus, right? Marketing, staffing, real assets, things of that nature, in order to actually use the funding to grow. The next part, when they're asked for their documents, they're organized, they're clean, they're ready for them, and the result of that profile looks predictable. So this is just an example of understanding that banks fund the profiles that actually look predictable, not just based on potential. And this is how you create the predictability in order to get the access to capital that you're looking for. Now, you don't necessarily have to do this right now, but what I want you to do is, as we go through this process, there's going to be things that you may or may not know. There may be some changes that you may have to make based on where you currently are and to position yourself for funding. What I want you to do is, as we go through this process, I want you to notate those changes for you and what you will need to do in order to position yourself to get access to capital, right? Now, just as I mentioned, I know that this is a business funding masterclass, right? But we're going to start at the bottom and we're going to work our way up. So I know that this is a business funding masterclass, but it is important to understand how impactful your personal credit is and your business credit is in order for you to get funded, right? So right here, we are going to start at the foundation for most people, which is going to be, yes, you can access business funding, but the foundation of that is that the personal credit has to be structured properly, right? So we're going to talk about a couple different things. When we talk about personal credit, there are three major credit reporting agencies that you should be aware of. There are others, but the three major ones that you really need to be aware of are TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. Now, when you're aware of these companies, it's also important to understand the type of information they report and how it actually affects you, right? So there's a couple different factors we are going to talk about. We're going to talk about utilization. We're going to talk about inquiries. We're going to talk about payment history. We're going to talk about credit age. We're going to talk about derogatory remarks. And we are also going to talk about the total accounts, right? So let's break down utilization. Dorsey, I like you. I want to get funded, but I need you to break this down really, really simple for me. All right, cool. So utilization just means the amount of credit you are using versus the amount of credit, or as compared to the amount of credit that you have available. So let's make it real simple. Let's say you have $1,000 credit card. If you are using $300 out of that $1,000 credit card, you are at 30%. If you're using $500 out of that $1,000 credit card, you're at 50%. If you're using $100 out of that $1,000 credit card, you're at 10%, right? So utilization is a key component, and it's important to understand here that the metric for this, although you could potentially use 100% of your credit limit, but the key metric here is to understand banks are in the business of lending money. However, they want to lend money to someone who seems more stable and doesn't need the money. How do we signal that to the bank? The metric here is with utilization, you want to stay under 30% utilization. So you want to be between 1 and 29% utilization, and that's really per account that's reporting on TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax, right? Very, very important. So that's the first way. How do we signify to the bank that we are a stable applicant and we are a predictable applicant in order to receive the funds that we're looking for, right? That's the metric for utilization. For inquiries, it's important to understand, and I'm gonna say this a couple times. When it comes to inquiries, most people, when they look at funding, they really only look at the credit score, right? The first myth I want to break is your credit score does not get you funded. It's what's based on the actual credit profile and the accounts that make up the profile. So it's important to understand that these are the metrics that we look at and we're going over now to actually position yourself based on your credit profile, not your credit score. The reason I say that is because inquiries, a lot of people misunderstand the value or the impact of inquiries on their credit report because they're only looking at the credit score. Yes, it is true. When you have an inquiry, what is that? An inquiry is just a record of a lender or someone looking at your credit to potentially extend you financing, right? Now, inquiries don't damage your score very much. Typically somewhere between 3 and like 10 points, right? Because of that, most people believe that inquiries really aren't that impactful. However, although inquiries don't affect your score very much, they do leave a record of how often someone is looking at your credit to potentially extend you financing. So what it shows is how often you're looking at credit. Too many inquiries during a short period of time is going to let the bank know or signal to the bank that you are actively looking for financing. So again, the banks want to lend and lenders want to lend to applicants who look more stable. How do we do that? You want to have less than 2 inquiries per bureau, right? So the metric here is you want to have between 0 and 2 inquiries on your credit report within the last 6 months whenever you are looking to go over and apply for business funding, right? That's very important. Next thing, the next data point we're going to talk about, payment history. Banks are in the business of lending. What does that mean? That means you are borrowing money from the bank to complete in the best interest of your operations. Key word here is borrow. So the bank was perfectly in the business or is in the business of giving you money. However, they want to make sure that they get paid back, right? They are all about giving you the capital if you qualify for it. However, they just have to make sure that they get paid back. So how do we signal to the bank that we're a qualified applicant? Payment history. Your payment history is a record of your payment history on your credit, which is on both personal credit and business credit, for how often you make on-time payments with lenders or businesses that extend you credit. So the key metric here that you really want for payment history is you want 100% payment history. Why? Because now that seems more stable to the bank. They have an understanding that you can manage the payments and the financing that you get, right? So that's payment history. Credit age. You want to take all of your accounts, the time that they were open, the number of years, add all of those together and divide it by the number of accounts that you have on your credit report. What that's going to do is give you your average credit age. A key metric that we look at here when looking for financing is 4+ years of age. Remember, banks want to lend on predictability. What was part of predictability? History. Banks want to see that you can manage financing for a couple years. They understand, hey, yes, you may have just gotten financing now, but or credit now, but can you manage it over a period of time? So a metric here, a key metric here is you want an average of 4+ years average age on your credit reports when you're looking for business funding, right? Next part here, derogatory remarks. What are derogatory remarks? Late payments, charge-offs, collections, bankruptcies, things of that nature. It's okay if you have it now, but it's important to understand that when you're looking for access to capital, if you have those things now, they have to be addressed prior to going through the funding process. Because again, banks are in the business of lending money, so they want to, at the highest probability, ensure that they can get paid back. If there's derogatory or collection accounts or negative information on the report, it signifies to the bank that that applicant would be considered a higher risk, right? So derogatory remarks, you want to make sure that those are cleaned up and addressed prior to submitting the application, right? The last data point we're going to talk about here is total accounts. Ideally, banks want to see you manage a couple different accounts, right? So they want to see someone manage, for example, a couple credit cards, some auto loans, a mortgage, maybe some kind of, cash loan, personal loan, something of that nature. They want to see experience from different accounts because they want to see financial habits and being able to manage those to be a higher quality applicant. Now, it's important to understand, these are the ideal data points. If you want the ideal process and the most streamlined process to get funding, these are the ideal data points. Now, it's important at the bottom, if you know it says these metrics, these are the ideal metrics for maximum approvals. Anytime someone talks to me, I want to help them do it big, right? I want to put you in the most streamlined position to get the access to capital that you're looking for. However, these are not the absolute determinants for an approval. Just kind of how I talked about, this process focuses less on the score and more on the profile and the accounts that actually make up that profile, right? So very, very important. Now, moving on to the next part, because I want to, again, we talk about payment history, but I want to make sure that everything relates and you can relate it to real life, right? So let's understand payment history. Now, everyone either has or knows someone, a relative, a friend, a family member, a colleague, and someone who borrows money, but they just happen to forget to pay you back on time, right? And what happens is, after a while, this person begins to build a reputation of either paying you back late or not paying you back at all, right? And after a while, when this person asks you to borrow money, you start to understand that, hey, I'm probably not going to get paid back from this. So what happens is, you stop loaning them money when they ask to borrow it, because the pattern feels risky, right? You start to believe that you're probably not going to get paid back, right? And we don't just want to be just throwing money away for no reason, right? So just as how we think like that as humans, banks think the same exact way. Your payment history is your reputation on paper. Now, most of us went to school. You had a grading report, right? You had a report card. Your credit report is your adult report card, right? This lets you know, or this lets lenders know, or others know your reputation on paper as far as financial stability. A clean recent streak shows reliability. But if there's late or missed payments, now that's going to signify uncertainty or financial imbalance to the lender. So therefore, it seems more risky. Remember, lenders and banks lend on predictability. Now, just how I discussed, if you've had issues, that's fine. It's just important to understand that the goal needs to be build a new pattern that makes the lender feel more comfortable. Because just how I talk about, lenders lend on history and what they can verify you have been able to do, right? So that is payment history. We're going to touch base back on utilization. I touched a little bit about it just a couple minutes ago, but I just want to make it as simple as possible. Just how I said, utilization is how much of your credit cards or your revolving limits that you are using when your statements report, right? Lower usage looks safer to a lender, and most strong profiles are going to show the balances in a low range. The low range that we talked about earlier is less than 30%. So the ideal range that you want to be in is 1 to 29% utilization. Just as another example here, if you have $1,000 credit card on $1,000 limit, a $250 balance would show a 25% utilization. Now, it's also important here. I want to cover this because people come to me all the time. They may not have known this information. They come to one of our classes, they see some of our content, they say, hey, I saw your video, I learned this great information, I paid down my card, I'm ready to apply today. It's important to understand, I've had hundreds, if not thousands of similar conversations like that over the years. It's important that just because you pay down your balance today does not mean that it's going to report today. Typically, balances are reported once a month and what is called your statement or your closing date. So for example, let's say you say, hey, Dorsey, this was great information. I paid down my balance. I'm going to go for funding tomorrow. And today is the 22nd. But let's say in this scenario, the person calls their bank or they look at their statement on their card and the closing date for that card is the 10th of the month. Well, today, as an example, is the 22nd. So even though it was paid down today, that's not going to reflect today. That person in that scenario is going to have to wait until the date of that closing date in this scenario, which is the 10th, before that balance will be reported to the credit reporting agencies, right? So it's very, very important to understand that because, like I said, funding is not just submitting applications. It's doing all of this work and making sure all of this information aligns before we ever submit that application, right? So very, very important. These little pieces of information can save you a lot of time and a lot of disappointment later, right? Now, let's talk about dirty versus clean as far as data integrity, and let's make it relatable back to real life, right? So we talk about business funding. So let's put yourself in a position where you have your business is growing, and you are looking to hire. Now, let's imagine in this scenario that you have two job candidates. One of them shows up in a wrinkled shirt. They give a different address. They give a different email. They give a different phone number, right? Every time you talk to them. The other one, they arrive pressed. They arrive clean. When you ask for their number, it's the same number every time. When you ask for their email, it's the same email every time. When you ask for their address, everything is aligned, right? They look clean. With these two applicants, which one would you hire? Would you hire applicant one that shows up in the wrinkled shirt? Or would you hire the one who shows up, applicant one who shows up wrinkled, unorganized, and inconsistent information? Or would you hire number two that shows up pressed, clean, ready to go, and is organized every time you speak to them, right? One or two. Now, most likely, you're going to hire candidate number two, especially if it's someone who is going to represent your business in a professional way. Credit files work the same exact way. Names and addresses that match across the report, it looks organized, it looks stable, it looks secure. When there's mismatches, that can trigger automated red flags, right? If there's mismatches in names, mismatches in address, it could be hard to verify you, or that applicant could potentially look unstable to the bank. And those mismatches, this is why it's important to understand these data points, because the modern banking system is computers, right? And so if your information is misaligned based on the data points that these computers and these algorithms are looking for, you could get an automatic denial or potentially flagged before the bank ever really actually reviews your profile based on what you could potentially qualify for. This is why we talk about it's not based on potential. It's based on history and predictability for the bank, which is very, very important. Now, identity alignment. Hey, Dorsey, how do I fix this, right? How do I get my identity lined up? How do I know if they can easily verify myself and to make sure that I look stable when I go and actually apply for funding, right? Great question. So this is what you want to make sure matches. You want to make sure your full legal name is spelled correctly across all of the credit reporting agencies. Again, what were those agencies we talked about? Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. You want to have your current address matching across all three credit reporting agencies. So when someone pulls up your information, they can see your name, okay, easily verified. They can see your address, consistent, easily verified, and consistent contact information, right? How do you do this? So if you say, hey, I'm looking at my report, I'm not really sure how to update it. So the first thing you are going to do is you're going to get access to your credit report. Every account that you have on there, what are accounts? Places that you have credit cards with, places that you have buy now, pay later accounts with, places that you have auto loans with, places that you have mortgages with. You want to call them first and make sure that they have all of your information correctly. Your full legal name, your address, and all of your contact information. You're going to call all of the people you have credit with or the banks that you have credit with first. Then you would call the credit reporting agencies, which are TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax, to make sure that they have the correct information. The reason we do this is because the credit reporting agencies, their job is to report the information that is being reported to them. They are the middleman. So we have to go directly to the source, which are the places that we have credit with that are reporting on our credit reports, to make sure that they have the information correctly and they're reporting it to the credit reporting agencies correctly on our behalf. Because even small misspellings of the name, small misspellings or mismatched addresses, again, can either slow decisions or result in automatic denials, even though everything else may be cleaned up. This is why it's important to understand credit scores do matter, but it's not, when you're looking at funding, it's not, you're not looking at the credit score. You have to absolutely look at the information that makes up the credit score, right? Because clear alignment helps you prevent some of those friction and some of those delays by making sure you are easily identifiable in the system, right? Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is thin versus thick profiles. This is another reason that we don't look at credit scores when looking for funding, because there are thin profiles and there are thick profiles. What does that mean? We're going to break it down in age, we're going to break it down in mix, and we're going to break it down in new accounts, right? So age, older files feel more predictable. It feels like they have more experience and they've overcome more things and have more experience in managing the financial products they have access to. So lenders are going to feel more comfortable. Earlier, when we talked about those ideal data points, we talked about being an average of 4+ years. Lenders are going to feel more comfortable when your average age is minimally between 3 to 5+ years. This is why we say 4, because it sits right there in the middle of those. But they really want to see an average of 3 to 5+ years. Again, the older the average age of your profile, the more comfortable a lender feels. Now, oldest accounts, they really want to see your oldest account like 5 to 7 years. Does it have to be 5 to 7? No. But again, if you're going to look for higher limits of funding, you want to be more stable and present yourself as more stable to the lender when they're looking at your when they're looking at your profiles. And then the newest account, anytime you add a new account, the bank says okay, or the lender say okay, you added a new account, that's good, but now we need to see that you have experience with that account. So it's also important that anytime you add a new account to your credit report, whether it's a credit card, whether it's an auto loan, whether it's a mortgage, whether it's a buy now, pay later account, the bank and lenders want to see what is your experience of this new account. So they want to see 3 to 6 months of history being paid on time for any new account that is added to your credit report, right? Very, very important. Now, a mix. You don't need everything, but a variety does help, right? So again, just how I talked about earlier, revolving accounts, they really want to see 3 to 5 managed credit cards is a healthy base. So 3 to 5 credit cards, again, if you only have 1 or 2, that's fine. But ideally, you want to have, again, you want to be able to manage multiple accounts, at least to the lenders, especially when you're looking for high limits of capital. So 3 to 5 credit cards is a good, healthy base for a good foundation, right? The other is installment accounts. What are installment accounts? Installment account are examples of things like mortgages, auto loans, or personal loans. Installment account means you know the amount you are paying over a predetermined term, whether it's 12 months, 24 months, 48, 60 months, etc., and you know the amount that you are paying every month. Your payment is broken down into installment payments. So you really want some examples or some variety of credit cards and installment accounts, so auto loans, mortgages, cash loans of nature, in order to build out your profile and make you look more lendable, right? New accounts, just kind of how I talked about a second ago in age, fresh activity can look uncertain in the short term. Now you have to build out your profile. So at some point, you're going to have to add some new accounts, right? If you're in this area, but just kind of how I touch base on, when you have new accounts, it can look uncertain at first. Hey, you've managed the other accounts that you've had great, but for some reason you got a new account. So we just want to make sure that you can manage that as well too. So lenders, what does this mean? Within the last 90 days, you really don't want any new accounts within the last 90 days whenever you're looking for funding. New accounts within the last 6 months, 0 to 2 is okay, right? It's okay. Ideally, though, again, the less new accounts, the better. The same thing as inquiries, just kind of I talked about earlier. Inquiries don't hurt your score a whole lot, but they're showing the bank a record of how often you are looking for credit products. So the metric here is 0 to 2 inquiries within the last 6 months, 0 to 3 inquiries within the last 12 months. These are your key points that you want to make sure are covered before you start submitting applications, right? Next part, let's talk about paperwork chaos versus a neat folder. And this is important, especially when you're looking for access to capital. So let's picture 2 things. Again, you have a business, you have 2 applicants. It's the same way that the applicant or that the bank looks at applicants whenever they walk in. So you're going to picture 2 applicants. One of them is going to dig through a backpack of crumpled papers. So you ask them for something, they open a backpack, and paperwork just goes all over the place, right? It's all over the floor, it's all over your desk. There's a huge mess. So not only is there a huge mess, but now you've got to kind of go over through all of this. You kind of got to take the time to organize it and figure out what goes with what, and right, it just looks unprepared. The other one hands you over a labeled folder with exactly what you asked for. Everything is organized, everything is neat. You can find what you're looking for when you find it, right? And you don't have to do all of this extra work to verify this person. Banks work the same way. They're going to reward the person who is prepared and professional. And when your documents are accurate, when they are current, then it makes it easier to verify you. And therefore, the yes for the lender feels a lot more comfortable, right? A lot of this really comes down to structure. Pretty much everything in funding comes down to structure, and you have to have the right structure, because if you don't have the right structure, then you're going to be seen as, again, unprepared or potentially a higher risk. Now, we've covered some information so far. Some of this you may have known, some of this you may not have known, right? Some of these things you might be on point. There might be some things that we discussed already that you might have to, correct before you can move through funding. So it's important, now that you know this information, if you're going to use this information and apply it to your life so that you can stay ready, so that you don't have to get ready, do me a favor, do me a check-in and type ready in the chat. There we go. Leviticus, thank you. Ready, ready, ready. All right, I'm going to take a sip of water really quick. All right, all right. There we go. Kelly, there we go. There we go. There goes the readies. There goes the money room. There we go. That's what I wanted to see. All right. Now, we talked a lot about personal credit. So that's the foundation to the personal credit, right? Now we're going to move over to business, because now we laid the foundation. Some of you may have the foundation. Some of you may have to work on the foundation. Some of you may have to fix a couple things, right? It's okay. If you didn't know this information before, it's okay, because that's why you got it now, so that you can actually correct it. Now, when we lay the foundation on the personal side, now we say, hey, okay, I'm good. I've got the foundation. I'm built here. I'm ready for this. Now I want to go over to the business side. Now, it's important to understand, just because you have a business, just because you got an LLC, right? Just because you have a corporation does not mean you have a fundable business, right? It's very important to understand that, because structure matters. Just how I said a second ago, structure matters. Now, the next thing I want to clarify, because we're going to talk about some LLCs and some corporations, but this is a trust class, right? So I can only give you based on my experience. On my experience, especially taking the information that Christina in 7 Ways teaches, is I want to keep my trust private, right? So because of that, the way that I teach is based on the way that I operate, right? Because I can only tell you from my experience. Now, for me personally, when I have my trust, I want to keep them private. I do not want them in the public sector doing business. So for me personally, I'm going to leverage public state entities such as LLCs and corporations to operate on behalf of the trust, right? So when we do this, some of you may have an LLC, some of you may have a corporation, some of you may not, right? So again, I don't want to make any assumption where you are. So as always, we're going to start at the very bottom and we're going to work our way all the way to the top in order to position and structure your business to be perceived and treated like a professional business and not treated like a hobby, right? Very important. So there's an 8-step process to get your business set up and established so that it looks professional and pristine when you are looking for business funding. Number 1, to access business funding, you need a business, right? So because of that, and the other thing we're going to talk about here is separating ourselves financially from our business. So we have a personal credit, we have business credit. We have personal expenses, we have business expenses. We have personal income, we have business revenue, right? So because of that, we have to separate ourselves. So to do that, you have to have a business name first. Once you have a business name, the second part is you want to get a domain. What is a domain? A domain is a fancy word for a website. When you have your business, it's going to be best for you to go and get a domain for your business so that it looks professional. So let's say, for example, your business is ABC Consulting. You want to go get abcconsulting.com, right? That looks professional. It transfers correctly, right? You don't want your business to be ABC Consulting and your website to be defconsulting.com, right? It doesn't make sense. You want your business name and you want a business domain to present your business a lot more professionally, right? That's number one. Number two to that is you're going to get a business address, a business email address. Now, the reason you get your domain is because you're going to use that domain to set up your business address. So let's say, for example, your name was Bob and you own abcconsulting.com. Your email is now bob at abcconsulting.com. It's not hotgirl97 at Hotmail. It's not that boy do it 92 at Gmail, right? And you may laugh, but these are real examples that we have seen and consistently see from people who are looking for business funding. It is important for you to position yourself for as a professional business, right? So you want the business email address, you want to add your domain, you also want a business address. Now, I will be transparent. Since COVID, it is a little bit more acceptable to have a home-based business. However, it is going to look a lot more professional if you separate yourself from your business. When we get to this point, most people are like, hey, man, Dorsey, this sounds awesome, but I don't have the money to go get a storefront, right? That's okay. I'm not asking you to. Sometimes your business may have to have a storefront. However, if your business doesn't have to have a storefront for your industry, all you have to do is Google your city and your state with the words executive office afterwards, right? So I'm in Orlando, Florida. So I would go to Google. I would type in Orlando, Florida, executive offices. What is going to come up is some shared space offices that you can get for a cheap price. They're going to vary. Sometimes you can get them on a monthly, sometimes you can get them yearly. They're really going to range anywhere on average between $25 and like $150 a month, depending on where you are located, right? And depending on the availability. But it's a lot cheaper than having to go out and getting a whole storefront or a whole building to just have a professional address, right? So you're going to get your professional address, and then you want to get a business phone number, right? It's going to look a lot more professional to separate, just like I said, your personal and your business. Now, when you have all of this information, every state has what's called the Secretary of State. If you did not know, this is where you go to actually establish your business, right? So you're going to go to the Secretary of State. You can do it yourself, or you can hire a third party. We personally use this website called Zen Business. That's ZEN business.com. The reason we like Zen Business is because they will only charge you state fees. They don't charge you other fees on top of that in order to file. So if you're in a position and you say, hey, I'm in Georgia, I'm in Florida, I'm in whatever state you're in, I want to go open up my business, but I'm not sure how to do it, you would ideally use Zen Business based on what we do, or you can go through and actually, go to YouTube or contact your Secretary of State and do it yourself. Whatever you want to do. Me personally, I like to do what I'm best at, and I like the professionals do everything else for me, right? So that's me personally. We use third parties. Now, the fourth part to that is that you want to have a registered agent and you want to have an operating agreement. A registered agent, I know you guys have talked about it in this class. A registered agent is just simply a person or an entity who can legally accept mail on behalf of the business. And then an operating agreement, this is important. Some businesses have it. Some people may not be aware of it. All the operating agreement does is it outlines how a business operates, how the business is designed to operate as it goes through its business activities, right? It is a professional document. If you don't know what an operating agreement is, you can go on Google, you can look for it. If you use ChatGPT or some kind of AI, you can put in your business and you could help it, and it can help you make an operating agreement as well too. It's important because sometimes when you go and look for funding, the banks ask for it. And it's a lot better to have it ahead of time than go to the bank and they ask for it and you're like, I have no idea what that is, right? So a key component of that is you want the operating agreement ahead of time, because again, it makes you seem and look a lot more prepared, right? Numbers 5, your EIN is free. I know Christina and 7 Ways have showed you how to get your EIN. The reason I bold and put free in here, because if you've had experience getting an EIN, it literally takes 5, maybe 10 minutes. You can download a PDF and you can have your EIN right then immediately. If you don't know how to get the EIN for LLC or corporation, YouTube, right? There's a lot of basic information out there for YouTube, and it is free to get an EIN. The reason I say that is because I've had conversations in the past and somebody's been charged $500, $1,000, $1,500 plus for someone to go get their EIN, right? And you don't have to do that. There's something called a DNB, which is the Dun & Bradstreet. It's a business credit profile. I do recommend getting your DNB set up, and you would need that, especially if you are getting into government contracts, right? Number 6, you want to establish some kind of online presence, a website, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, something. Now, when it comes to websites, people say all the time, hey, Dorsey, man, I've wanted to get this website done forever. I just don't have, these thousands of dollars to go out and invest into a website. You can go on sites like Fiverr. You can go on sites like Upwork. You can get a website made for you. It doesn't have to be this glamorous, all bells and whistles website. It can be a basic one-page website, right? It doesn't have to be a whole lot, but it's something that helps separate yourself and makes your business look a lot more professional. Now, number 7, when you have a business, just kind of how we talked about through this whole thing, you have to separate yourself personally and business. So what that means is if you have a business, you need to open up a business bank account. Now, I can't tell you how many people I've had conversations with over the years who have a business, but they have no business bank account. They've been running it through their personal account. Now, I'm also going to introduce something that we call relationship banking. Relationship banking is a fancy word for starting to use a bank's products or their services in order to strengthen the relationship with the bank, right? The way that we look at this is banking is kind of like dating, right? Before you typically go all in, you probably want to do a couple dates to see how compatible you are with this person, or how interested you are in them or they are in you. Banks work the same exact way in the business of lending money, right? But they want to do business with people who want to do business with them for the long term. So the reason I say that is in number 7, when you have a business, you absolutely have to have a business bank account. However, the more products you have with a bank, what are products? Accounts being opened, whether personal, business, checking, or savings, if you have merchant processing, if you have credit products, right? All of the products the banks offer, the more products you have with a bank, the more interested the bank looks at you being in them. So you absolutely must have a business bank account. But let's say you go to a bank and you open up a business bank account, then yes, you do have the option to open up a separate personal account with them as well too, to build the relationship. But all of your business transactions need to go through your business account, right? Now, the last part of number 7 is, yes, you have to make some kind of deposit. Now, it doesn't have to be thousands of dollars. Well, let me preface. Every bank is a little bit different, but generally speaking, you don't have to put a whole lot of money in the banks. At most banks, you could open up an account and put $50, $100, something, because when you make a deposit, it's what's called activating the account. You don't want to open the business bank account, put no money in there, and then go and apply for the products, right? The math isn't necessarily mathing. So you want to make sure to show the bank that you have an interest in them. Number 8, just kind of how we talked about a second ago, we talk a lot about relationship banking. Banking products, the more products you use with a bank, the more interested they are going to feel that you are in them, right? So what does that mean? You're going to open up bank accounts with them. You can open up merchant accounts. What are merchant accounts? If you have a business and you want to process credit cards, they are processed through something called a merchant account. Banks also offer merchant account services. So things like merchant accounts, bank accounts, or credit products with a bank as well too, right? Very, very important. Now, next part, business structure. Because just how I talk about, just because you have a business set up at your Secretary of State does not mean you can dive out for funding immediately, right? It's important to understand that you follow the process that we just talked about, because just how I kind of talked about on the personal side, banks don't fund potential. They fund structure They fund predictability. So most businesses get denied because they look unprepared, right? So fundable businesses aren't just established, they're structured to be trusted. And when you follow what we just did on the previous page, it's going to show you how to set up your business the right way. So now you have a professional presence, you have the proper registrations, and you have what's called a smart financial setup. Because the reality is this, it's really simple. When banks see real businesses, they send real money. That is as simple as this gets. When you position yourself to qualify for the funding that you're looking for, this is when they will actually send, you can actually access the capital. Over here on the right, this is just a couple things that we want to go over for most reasons that businesses get denied. Number one, personal information does not match across the credit reporting agencies. That's exactly why we talked about the personal credit first, because it's the foundation to this, right? Number two, no real online presence or business infrastructure. It just looks like a fly-by-night business setup today, very little, legitimacy, and therefore it's a higher risk to the bank, right? Next one, no credit history under the business. No credibility with the business credit reporting agencies, right? Or they're just not positioned to pass underwriting because they're hard to be verified. And therefore, again, it looks more risky to the bank. Banks' number one goal is to mitigate risk. The less risky someone looks, the more money they get. The more risky someone looks, the less money they get, right? That's it. Now, when it comes to businesses, having businesses, these are different ways that we work with businesses. So, and understand that there are different ways to establish or acquire a business. So we're going to talk about three of the major ways for a position that you may be in or for the experience that we have as an organization. So we're going to talk about startups, we're going to talk about age corps, and we're going to talk about acquisitions, because there are pros and cons to every portion, right? There is no, let me get this ahead of time. There is no best option for everyone. There's a best option for you. This is why I say everything in this process is very, very specific. But when you're looking at these different ways to access or raise capital for your business, I just want you to be aware of the different opportunities that you have, right? So startup, there's some pros and cons to everyone, just kind of I talked about. Now, for startup, the pros are you get the maximum flexibility. You can create the business from the ground up, right? You get to create everything customized exactly how you want it to be. Now, you can make new offerings, you can establish new markets, you can completely innovate and create whatever's in your mind from the ground up, right? Perfectly fine. Now, one common misunderstanding is that just because you have a startup, one common misunderstanding is people believe that they're not able to access capital, right? Startups still can secure capital and get funded. They typically need to be at least 30 days old, though, of being established. But just kind of how we talked about earlier, the older something is, the more experience it is perceived to have. Therefore, it is perceived to be more stable. So yes, it is possible to get access to capital under a startup, but understand that funding is easier with older entities, right? Which leads me over to my next part, which is age corps. Now, age corps is a very common topic, very popular topic. It's really very simple. A age corp is a business that was legally established at an earlier time or previously. Some of you may have an age corp already. You're like, wow, maybe, I don't know. So this is how a lot of people find that they have age corps. You may have opened up an LLC. You may have opened up a corporation. Maybe you intended something some time ago. Maybe it was a couple years ago, right? And just for one reason or another, you establish it, you set it up, but it just hasn't been used in a couple years, or life just went a different direction, right? Pretty common scenario. Now, if you had that already, a lot of people think like, oh, I don't use that business, so I'm just going to throw it to the side. They don't realize how valuable that entity is just because it was set up previously, because it is an older entity, so it's more established. That's one form of an age corp. Or there are age corps that you can purchase, which you are just legally getting a business that was previously established for the age, right? So it's a fast track to business funding is leveraging age corps for a more stable application because age corps get broader access to business credit and financing because of its age and longer history. Remember, the older something is, the more experience it is perceived to have. And the reason that assumption is because of seasons. They want to see seasons and businesses and people being able to manage multiple seasons to be a more secured or qualified applicant. Now, it's also important to note, though, those are the pros for age corps, but it's also important for me to know, as much of an advocate as I am for age corps, it's very important that you work with someone or an organization who is experienced with age corporations and being able to acquire them and transfer them, right? Now, shameless plug, we are a trusted resource for age corporations, and we can help match you with pre-vetted opportunities for solidified and legitimate age corporations, right? Because there are companies out there who do not deal legitimately with age corporations. So that's why I do have to mention, as much of an advocate as I am for age corporations, you also have to work with a trusted resource when you are dealing with age corporations, right? Going over to my third, acquisitions. One of my favorite ways to establish businesses is to acquire them. Most people don't realize that you can fast track acquiring a business or business growth by acquiring a business that is already operating, which already has established operations and market presence. Now, what happens when you acquire a business that already has traction? You're acquiring a business that gets immediate access to revenue, trained staff, and valuable customer relationships, right? Acquisitions are amazing, but and as much of an advocate as I am for acquisitions and buying and selling other companies, it's also important that you work with someone who is experienced with acquisitions and mergers and acquisitions, because there's a lot of due diligence, there's a lot of research, and there's a lot of legalities that come along with it, right? Now, as shameless plug as well too, we have a lot of experience in structuring strategic partnerships and dealing with mergers and acquisitions for both clients and partners. So you've got multiple different ways to establish or acquire a business. Again, there is no right or wrong way. There's no one size fits all. It all depends on what actually fits your specific circumstances, right? So when you have these and you're going to the bank, it's important to have some information with you ahead of time so that you are more prepared and seen more professional. So these are the documents that banks expect when you are opening bank accounts and when you are looking for access to capital. Number one, they're going to need your personal ID, because they're going to look, this is why information matters, and the structure of that information matters. Because when they look at your ID, they want to compare your name and address on your ID versus what is on the credit report, right? This is the first step for verification. So you want to have your personal ID updated with all of the information correctly, with the correct spelling of your name and your current address. Now, second part, proof of address. Sometimes you need to bring in a utilities. Sometimes you can bring in just an extra credit card. Sometimes you can bring in a lease, something of that nature, to have it ahead of time with you so that you can verify your address with the bank. Now, entity documents. Entity is just a fancy word for business, right? Business documents. You want to have your EIN letter, which is the IRS, the letter that verifies your EIN. You want to have what's called the AOI, which is the Articles of Incorporation for corporations, or the Articles of Organization for LLCs. You want to have that. That is a document and a piece of paper that you get from the Secretary of State when your business is established. Now, the next thing I talked about that I touched on a little bit previously was operating agreements and bylaws. It's an operating agreement for an LLC. It is a bylaw for a corporation. All these documents do is just outlines who is authorized to do what within a company and how the company operates and is built to operate, right? So again, you want to have these documents ahead of time, because being prepared is absolutely an advantage. You don't want to go to a banker and you're talking about all these great things and all this potential your business has, and the banker says, hey, okay, cool. Can you hand me your operating agreement, or can you hand me your EIN letter? And you're sitting there like, can you tell me what that is? Or, you're going to have to give me a minute, because you look unprepared, right? When banks are lending money, they expect and assume to work with people who know what they have going on, right? Now, when you're structuring, let's get into strategy. When you are structuring deals, funding deals, it's important to know who pulls what. And this is why these two pieces tie together: personal credit, business funding. Because banks view the risk through the credit reporting agencies that we talked about, the three primary: TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. Now, when most people are looking at credit reports, the assumption they make is that banks are going to all review all three credit reporting agencies, and that is false. Although there are some banks that do view all three whenever they inquire, typically banks will view one or two out of the three, right? So it's important to notate that, right? This is important as we begin to build this strategy. So what you want to do is, the foundation is the credit report. You want to check all three reports and identify the one that looks the strongest, either based on, you can get a general idea. As much as I hate talking about credit scores when it comes to funding, you can get a general idea of the bureau that has the highest score is assumed to be the bureau, or to be the credit reporting agency that has the best information, right? Not necessarily always true. That's why I say assumed, but this is why we look at profiles as compared to scores. Now, what you're looking for is all the things we talked about earlier: clean payment history, lower utilization, matching names and addresses, fewer inquiries. And then what you want to do is choose the lenders that pull that credit reporting agency first, right? Now, it's important. We're going to break this down in a second to help you get started, but you don't have to memorize every lender rule, right? There are thousands of banks. They all lend differently, right? You don't have to memorize every lender rule. You don't have to be the expert. It's just important to do this. Build a simple habit. You're going to look at the strongest report first. You're going to establish lender relationships second. Again, what does that mean? Open bank accounts, use credit products, use the banking products to build that interest and that trust. You're going to make that deposit with those banks, help them start making some transactions. And what this does is it begins to create momentum and keep the process predictable. Even if you do these basic things right here, there are a large majority of people who do not do this and are not aware of this information at all. So it's very important that you separate yourself and at least begin to start that momentum. Now, very simple. Again, strongest report, establish a relationship, make a deposit, right? Now, monitoring and timing. It is important. This is huge. There's just a couple bullet points on this, but timing and monitoring matters so much. There is nothing in this process that is random. Everything, and I mean everything, has to be done for a specific reason at a specific time. And if you get outside of those timing windows, it can create a lot of problems for you, right? So you want to check all three reports and watch for updates to post. The reason I say that, the banks are not going to listen to what you say. They are going to look at what is on the paperwork and the reports, and that is all they're going to go off of. I need to make that very clear, because again, banks do not lend on potential. They only lend on predictability. If it's on paper, they trust it. If you say it and it's not documented or verifiable, then they're not going to believe it, right? Very, very simple. So you have to make sure that the credit report is aligned, because that's what they are going to pull when they're looking at you, right? So let's say you've gone through this process, you've paid down some accounts, you might have some negative information that you disputed, right? But it's important that even if you paid it down, even if you got that dispute done, If it hasn't reported on your credit report, even though you mentally know that that information is not there, if it's not reported on the credit report, it's not going to help your application, right? Very simple. Timing matters. You submit. I say this all the time. All of the funding is not just submitting applications. All of the work for funding is done before that application is ever submitted. You only submit applications. And yes, if you haven't noticed, this is a process, right? It's not you go to the bank and you just get all this money for no reason, right? It's a process. You have to be willing to commit to the process if you want to get access to capital, because you only submit after the file looks ready. And you only verify that by what is actually reporting on the credit reports and what's being reported on you and the business's behalf, right? Now, patience is important, because patience for one reporting cycle can be the difference between approved and denied, right? So earlier, I talked about statement dates, and most people, they may not have known this information. They come to one of our classes, they see our content, they work with someone on our team, and they say, hey, I got everything paid down, right? That's the scenario we talked about earlier. Now, let's say, because we've had these scenarios in the past, as a consultant, we can only advise clients on what the best practice is. Once a client makes the decision, we have to, really abide by what's on behalf of that client. And the reason I say that is because one cycle, 30 days, could be the difference between you getting approved what you're looking for and denied and getting nothing, right? Because there have been clients or situations in the past where a client knows in their head that they paid down a balance, but that hasn't reported yet. And because they know that they paid it down, they're going to do everything they can to communicate with that banker. Hey, I paid it down. I did this, this, and this. But if it doesn't report on the credit report, it doesn't matter. This is why I cover all of this, because what we think and we know in our head and what's actually reporting on paper are two different things. And it has to absolutely report on paper for you to verify. It doesn't matter if you have the best story in the world, if you've got the best opportunity in the world. I have literally watched clients and people below funding sequences where they could have been positioned for high limits of capital who get nothing just because they weren't really willing to follow the process and wait that extra little bit of time before the information reports so that they can get access to capital, right? Very important. So let's break this down simply. You're going to do the right credit reporting agency, again, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. You're going to do the right banks in the right order. Just as we talk about, this is strategic. This is not random. There is nothing about this that is random. It is very, very strategic. Now, you're going to lead with banks that favor your strongest credit reporting agency, right? We're going to break that down in just a second. Now, the other thing, and this is a feature that not a lot of people are aware of, is when you're submitting applications, you want to start with what's called a pre-qualification if possible. Some banks have it, some banks do not. Whenever we talk about inquiries, there are what are called hard inquiries and there are soft inquiries. Hard inquiries are what we talked about earlier, where on your credit report, there is a record of someone inquiring on your credit report. That is what's called a hard inquiry. There are soft inquiries where a lender will look at your credit report and give you an idea of whether you may be approved or not before you actually submit the hard inquiry. The reason we do soft pull pre-qualification first is because if a bank has a pre-qualification and you go put in your information for the application, and if they give you the denial on a pre-qualification, you're not penalized by that. There's no record. There's no hard inquiry. Now, if you go to a lender that doesn't have pre-qualification, then anytime you submit that application, there's going to be a hard inquiry. The strategy here is the pre-qualification doesn't guarantee the approval, but it gives a lender a peek behind the curtain before they actually leave a hard inquiry and there's a record of it. The reason this is beneficial for you is because if you're looking at a bank and they have pre-qualification and you happen to submit the pre-qualification and you don't get the approval for the pre-qualification, do not submit the actual application, because they just told you, hey, Most likely, if you submit this, we're not going to deny you. So us understanding the impact of inquiries, we don't want to waste an application for someone who didn't give us the pre-approval. On the flip side, if they have a pre-qualification and you see that pre-qualification and they approve you on the pre-qualification, it doesn't guarantee that application is approved, but there is a much, much higher probability that it will be approved because the bank already took a quote unquote peek behind the curtain and they see what you had as potential to be approved by their bank, right? So very, very important and a very key strategy whenever you do this. Now, after each sequence, these are data-driven decisions. You're going to pause and you're going to confirm decisions. Now, what's going to happen is based on the decisions that the lenders make, if the results shift, you're going to adjust your order rather than forcing the plan. We only make data-driven decisions as we go through this process, right? So understand this whole process is designed to create momentum over any single decision, right? So what does this mean? A round is what we call a round of funding, where we're going to look at multiple institutions that we may be able to use in our funding sequence, right? A round is a set of smart attempts, not a single shot. So let me set the expectations. A lot of clients come to us, hey, Dorsey, I want 50,000, I want 100,000, right? Absolutely possible for most people when they understand the data points that we talked about in here. However, the expectation is you're probably not going to get 50 to 100,000 from one bank. Possible in some circumstances, but that's the exception. That's not the standard. The assumption is that if you want 50 to 100,000, possible to get it, but you're going to have to go through a couple different banks to do it. For example, it's a lot easier to go to one bank and let's say get 10 to 30,000 than it is, and then you go to 2 or 3 to get the amount that you're looking for, as compared to saying, hey, I need 50 or 100,000, I'm going all in on this bank. Realistically, probably not going to happen. Possible in certain scenarios, absolutely, but it's not the standard, right? So you have to understand it's a set of smart attempts, not a single shot. The other expectation is that every lender is different. Some approvals may be large, some of them may be small, some of them may be declines. These are natural flows, ebbs and flows of a high-level funding sequence and create a financing plan, right? So the importance here is you want to log each application, you want to keep your profile clean, and you want to adjust based on the results of the application. Your total outcome comes from the sequence, the sum of the sequence, not a single decision. So please execute and understand that not all eggs are in one basket, right? So again, some approvals will be large, some of them will be small, some of them will be declines. Please go into it with this expectation and don't get discouraged when you get your first approval, but it's a low limit, or you get your first decline. Again, it is a process to build your foot in the door. Now, give me like 30 seconds. Let me get a sip of water, and we're going to get right back into it. We're going to pull all of this together. So let's talk about BRMs and relationship banking. So people ask me, they say, hey, this information is great, but how do I find out what credit reporting agency a bank pulls from? I'm looking at TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax, but I don't know how to figure out this information from the bank. All you're going to do is pick up the phone and call them, right? So we're going to go over a couple of different things: what to ask, what to bring, and the best practices. How do you find out what credit reporting agency a bank pulls from? You ask them, hey, Mr. Banker, I'm looking at applying for your business credit card or your business loan or setting up a bank account. Just out of curiosity, what credit reports do you look at, or what credit bureaus or what credit reporting agency do you look at when you're looking to qualify clients? Someone who's in that bank is going to know, hey, we pull TransUnion, we pull Experian, we pull Equifax, we pull all three. We pull TransUnion and Experian, or a combo, right? They're going to tell you when you work with someone who has experience to do that. So how do you know? You call them. The other thing you want to ask is the ability to apply for multiple products. So the assumption for most people is that they're going to go to bank A and they can only, every product is an inquiry. they don't realize that you can ask a bank, hey, if I apply for one product here and I get the inquiry, am I going to get an inquiry for every product that I get from the bank or not? Because sometimes banks are different. Sometimes you can get one product per inquiry. Sometimes you can get two products per inquiry. Sometimes you can get three products per inquiry. So what does that mean? Some banks you can go and get multiple credit cards. Some banks you can go and get multiple lines of credit or multiple loans. Sometimes you may be able to get a credit card and an auto loan, or a credit card and auto loan and a mortgage, right? Your sequence can differ, but you may not know those possibilities unless you actually ask the bank what their opportunities are to expand the relationship with that bank and actually apply for funding. Number three, docs needed to apply. How do you go and prepare to a bank and see more prepared? You call ahead and ask them, hey, I'm interested in coming in and apply for one of your credit products. Please let me know what documents I need to bring ahead of time to save your time and mine, right? So what docs do they need? You ask. And in the timeline to apply. It's important to ask this question too whenever you call banks, because certain banks have different rules based on if you open an account, if you can apply immediately. And then sometimes you don't even need to open an account to apply for a product. And sometimes you might have to have the bank account open 30, 60, 90 days, sometimes a couple months, before you can actually apply for those products. So if, for example, if you're looking for funding next week, you don't want to go to a bank and build a relationship with a bank per se in your short term that's going to make you wait 30 days, 90 days, 6 months in order to apply for their capital, right? So that's important. What to ask, what to bring. You want a clear business explanation. Please know what your business does, know how to explain it in an elevator pitch. This is not a long drawn out thing, right? Bankers are very busy. They want to know that you are punctual and that you are used to saying what you do. When they ask you your business explanation, it is a 2 to 3 sentence explanation. Very punctual, very to the point, very professional. If the banker needs more information, they will ask, right? So a clear business explanation. You want to have experience. When bankers are having interviews or consulting with business clients, they expect them to carry themselves in a professional manner, right? So the business explanation makes it seem to the banker that you're used to saying this. And as the professional, you should be, right? Deposit funds. You want to bring some kind of cash in order to deposit into the bank account. Personal identification, IDs, things of that nature, and the entity docs that we talked about previously, right? You want to have all of this ahead of time. And if you call ahead and they tell you additional docs, then guess what? You want to take those with you as well too, right? Now, best practices, very important, short and direct. Just kind of I talked about with clear business explanation. Bankers do not want a long drawn out answer. They want a short and direct answer. Again, if they need more information, I promise you they will ask. Number two, long-term focus. Understand your plan for your funds. So that way when they ask you, hey, you're looking for 20,000, you're looking for 10,000, you're looking for 50,000. How are you going to use these funds? You want to be able to explain how you're going to use the funds and not, oh, I'm not sure. I'm just waiting to see how much I get before I can, make a determination. That is a huge red flag, right? Please understand that is a huge red flag. If you show up on time, you're late. Show up early. Bankers are very busy. They have back-to-back appointments. You want to make to show up early for your appointments. And when you explain your business, you want to explain it in a professional, low-risk manner. You don't want to make your business seem high risk. You don't want it to seem up and down or all of this information because, again, less risky, more money, more risky, less money, or not at all, right? So very, very important. Now, we've gone over a lot, so I just want to do a slight check-in. If this has taught you something new today, or if you're finding any of this information valuable, I just want to make sure that, we're here providing the level of service and information we expect. If you will do me a favor, if you're finding any of this new or any of this information valuable, please do me a favor and just type win in the chat. While you do that, I'm going to take a sip of water. Awesome. Leviticus, Diana, there we go. Win, win, win. Awesome. I'm glad that you are finding this valuable because that's all we want to do is just make sure that you get great applicable information. Now, I don't know what this, I'm sure you guys can maybe see this red line. It just popped up on the screen. Not sure what that was. So we'll just have to bypass that. That isn't really supposed to be there, but that's okay, right? So now we're going to talk about banking products, more about programs and what they're best used for. So primarily, when people are looking for business funding, they are looking for one of these 5 categories on the left. They are either looking for credit cards, they are either looking for business lines of credit, they are looking for revenue-based financing, they are potentially looking to use the SBA, or they are looking for a term loan. Now, again, just kind of how I talked about earlier, there is no best product for every person. There is no one size fits all. It completely depends on what the use case is for your particular business, right? So let's talk about a couple different things and what they're best for. So credit cards would be a great option if you're looking for a 0% introductory. So a lot of people aren't aware. Business credit cards typically come 0% introductory for 6 to 24 months. What that means is that the bank will give you access to capital and they're not going to ask for interest on it based in whatever that intro period is. Business credit cards and credit cards are the product that give you the 0% introductory that you can leverage the bank at 0%, right? Extremely valuable. Not a lot of people are aware of these kind of products, right? It is the only product that you can get 0% introductory outside of grants, right? But we talk about traditional based funding and bank based funding. We don't talk about grants, right? So I just wanted to specify that. Now, credit cards are best for 0% introductory and fast working capital, right? Works just like a credit card. Now, business line of credit works similar to a credit card, but it's best for flexible access because it's easier for quick access to cash. You can have revenue-based funding. So sometimes, this is why I always mention this, sometimes revenue-based funding is specifically a lot of times catered to businesses or operators who have a business that is performing, but they may have some credit challenges, right? So a lot of people, I know we talk a lot about credit-based financing, but there are a lot of businesses out there who their operators might have some challenges on their credit, but they've got a business that makes at least $10,000 plus a month. There are some opportunities in order for you to still look for access to capital. Now, the reason this is beneficial or what this is really best for is a quick cash injection into the business, right? SBA, another one of my favorite lending programs, especially for business acquisitions. This is great for larger or longer term deals, right? If you're acquiring businesses or if you're looking for like commercial real estate or things like that nature, it's a lot larger, right? And it's over a longer period of time for you to pay back. Or you're going to look at options like a term loan, which is more just like you're going to get a lender is going to give you cash. You know ahead of time how much cash you have to pay back over what period of time and how much that monthly payment is, right? So it makes it easier for budgeting because it's fixed and predictable. The ultimate thing here to understand is, especially as you follow my coaching and the things that we talked about, is if it qualifies, you can fund it or we can fund it, right? If it qualifies for the funding that you're looking for, you can access it. And this is how you put yourself in position to qualify for the funding that you're looking for, right? Now, I do want to give a couple different examples. I like a couple different of these case studies because they highlight a couple different scenarios for people who have worked with us, who have followed this coaching, who have followed the things that we train and talk about, and have followed it to a T and have generated a result. Now, as a disclaimer, past performances do not guarantee future results in the funding. I'll say it over and over again. No one can guarantee you funding. And if they do, they are doing it illegally, right? So understand past performances do not guarantee future results. However, I just wanted to give a couple different examples because it's not always about where you start, it's about where you're going, right? And even a no today doesn't mean it's a no later, right? No means next opportunity. So even if they tell you no today, now you understand how to position yourself to qualify for the funding that you're looking for, right? So I just want to break down a couple different examples. There's like 3 or 4 that I'm going to go over. The first one that we're going to talk about is Marcus, right? Because Marcus was an aspiring entrepreneur. He was denied by multiple banks. He had a lower credit score, and ultimately he really had no clear path to funding. Now, what had happened is he was on social media, he was on YouTube. He saw all these people talk about going to all these banks and applying here, and they would get all this money, right? And so he came to us after months of frustration. He's like, hey, I can't really figure out what's going on, right? I'm following what everyone is telling me. I'm applying at all the banks. I'm using what they tell me, but I can't really figure out why I'm not getting approved, right? And the reason was his credit report had issues. He didn't have a class like this to understand the data points he needs. He just saw something on Instagram, thought it was flashy, and started following what they said without having any context to it, right? And so the context here, he had all the credit issues that we talked about earlier: outdated addresses, utilization, late payments, and he really thought funding just wasn't an option. The reason I like this is because it highlights it's not about where you start, it's about how you finish. So Marcus came to us, we went through a complimentary audit, we helped him understand the data points and how he was being negatively affected by the data points and why he was being denied. We helped him connect him to our resources, help him build positive accounts. And after going through the process, it's important, funding is a process. It is not pull up a bank today, submit an application, and money just falls out the sky, right? It's a process, but Marcus was willing to follow the process. And after he went through this and got everything cleaned, put a funding sequence together, executed the funding sequence, he was able to go to the largest bank in the US currently, which is Chase Bank. He was able to get set, although this is not a typical result. Remember, when you follow the process, there are possible outcomes. And although this isn't a typical result, he was able to go to one bank, get $75,000. He can leverage 0% for 12 months, and he was able to invest into his business, get into marketing, and upgrade his equipment, all without using his own money, just by following the process, right? So I like that because, again, it's not about where you start, it's about where you finish, right? Next scenario is sometimes a lot of times we work with business owners who are already established, right? And that was really the case for Michael. He had everything going. He had a successful business. He had great credit. He had the operations. He had the systems. The only thing he didn't understand was financial strategy. He was working with a bank, and all of his eggs were in one bank. He had just never even thought of working or leveraging multiple banks. He just always came up, hey, I got this bank account, I'm going to work with this. And that was all he knew. He didn't realize the difference between lenders or that you could use multiple banks, right? So ultimately, he came to us. We helped him understand. We didn't want to replace his options or replace his bank. We just wanted to help him understand other options that he could do, right? Or look at. So what happened? He came to us. We organized everything. We helped him structure everything. Michael was able to go to one lender. If you can see a screenshot, excuse me, over here on the left, he was actually qualified for a little over 300,000. He actually only accepted the 300,000 that he was using for an acquisition. So the reason I like this is because there are high-level operators out there who've got the business, but they don't understand the full strategy, right? And so that's why I like this, because he was able to come and get one approval for 300,000, and we were able to execute that outside of, the knowledge that he had already. Now, I like this next option with Eric. There's a couple different reasons why. For one, it's going to highlight the multiple products. But the other thing is Eric was an entrepreneur, a seasoned entrepreneur, 10 years, like that's a long time, right? It takes a long time and a lot of effort to be an entrepreneur for 10 years. But the problem is that he didn't understand how he could leverage banks. He just had an assumption that banks were out to get him. They want to take everything. He just didn't understand how to leverage them, right? Until he came into a situation, he really needed to manage some things. He really needed to grow his business, but he was in a predicament where he couldn't really leverage or get out of the situation he was in. So he came to us. We helped him understand that banks are in the business of lending. This is why I literally prefaced this from the beginning, because banks are in the business of lending. We just have to understand how to put ourselves in position to get access to capital. Banks are not enemies. They give access to capital, which you can use to grow in the best interest of your business, right? So we showed him how to structure his business, how to organize everything. And ultimately what happened, there's a bank that we like out in the Midwest. It's Key Bank. He was able to go to a regional bank. He was able to get 2 products from one bank, 1 inquiry, a $50,000 business line of credit, a $40,000 business credit card, 2 products, 1 inquiry, $90,000 from one bank. Again, not necessarily a typical result, but you understand the possibilities when you start to apply the things that I have taught you throughout this process. And the reason I like Eric is because a lot of times, for me personally, I like turning doubters to believers. The reason is because once you do, when you take a doubter and they become a believer, now they understand the process. And it relates a lot because Eric is actually one of our biggest advocate and one of our biggest people who bring us funding deals because of he saw the process and he became a believer. And the reality is this: funding isn't luck. It's a system. It's the same one that you saw here today, the same clients that you saw earlier. The steps between from where you are now to where you're going is going to be different per person and per business. But the reality is when you follow the steps that we've talked about, it is a proven strategy. It's the same one you're learning today. They had a roadmap. They knew which banks to approach and when. They understood how to structure their credit and business to qualify. And when you know what to do, when you know who to talk to and how to actually present yourself, funding becomes predictable and not impossible. This is the power of having a real playbook and a real system to position yourself for access to capital. So I know we went over a lot throughout this process. I want to summarize everything in really 4 phases so that you can identify which phase you are in, right? Phase 1, you want to clean and align. You want to pull your credit reports. You want to match your name and addresses everywhere, like we talked about previously. And again, it's not about where you start, it's about where you finish. If you have some negative or some inaccurate or some mismatching, or some derogatory information, you want to dispute that ahead of time. You're going to do that in phase 1. Phase 2 is going to be stabilize and prepare. So if you have high utilization, that's fine. We just want to work on paying down that utilization, getting that utilization down to put you in a position so that you can qualify. Perfectly fine. Happens all the time. Number 2, you want to open those bank accounts and you want to prepare any key docs that you're going to need in order to set up your business or get those bank accounts open. Phase 3 is going to be verify and plan. You're going to confirm your strongest credit reporting agency. Again, TransUnion, Experian, or Equifax. You're going to put a mock draft order and you're going to get pre-qualified and go and speak to these bankers and these BRMs. BRMs are banking relationship managers, fancy word for banker, right? You're going to go and speak with these different bankers at these different banks to understand what they need in order to process the application. And then phase 4, it's really just executing and reviewing, right? You're going to submit those banks in sequence based on the sequence you create. You're going to log the outcomes and adjust. Again, log and make data-driven decisions. Do not make an assumption and try to force a plan. You can only move based on data, and then you're going to plan your next round based on the results of that initial process, right? Now, earlier, we talked about the ideal qualifications that you need to get funded. Right now, we're going to talk about a little bit more of the minimum credit-based qualifications. So, minimum. As much as I hate talking about credit scores, if you haven't gotten that about me as we go through this process, generally, if you're looking at a credit-based sequence and you want an idea to where you are, generally, it would be a 680 plus credit score across the board. Now, we talked about earlier, you want to have a mix of credit cards. For some of you, that's possible. For some of you, it may not be right now, right? So you really want minimally 1+ major credit card. That's a major issuer such as Visa, MasterCard, American Express, or Discover. You really want the 1 year plus old credit card with really a $2,000 limit at least, right? Now, if you have less, it doesn't mean that you're not qualified. It just means that we have to reset your expectations about what you could potentially qualify for, right? So lower limits mean lower approvals, higher limits, higher approvals. In short, in the industry, it's what is called comparable limits. Banks are looking at what you currently have to compare or consider what they will lend you, right? So they want to see what you've currently been able to manage, and they'll give you something somewhere in the ballpark for, you know, for their limits. You still want no derogatory information. Again, no late payments, no collections, no charge-offs, no bankruptcies, anything of that nature. No late payments minimally within the last 12 months. So no late payments minimally within the last year. Ideally, if you had some late payments, you want those outside of 2 years, right? Again, if you have late payments, it just means that you have to build a new habit or report of on-time payments, right? So really, no late payments within the last 12 months. Minimally, ideally, no late payments within the last 24 months, which would be 2 years. No more than 3 new inquiries within the last 6 to 12 months, just like we talked about earlier. When you're looking at business funding, minimally, earlier we talked about 4+. When it comes to business funding, minimally 2+ year average age. And listen, there's something in the industry, it's something called an authorized user. Please understand, when it comes to business funding, just when I go back to those comparable limits that I was just talking about a second ago, banks want to see the accounts that you have in your primary name. So they want credit cards in your name, right? Loans in your name, not necessarily you being an authorized user or a joint account member for someone else, right? Very, very important. No new accounts really within the last 6 to 12 months. Worst case, minimally 3. But again, doesn't mean you're not going to get, you know, denied. It just means that we have to realistically set those expectations about what you would realistically qualify for, right? Business funding is not magic, right? It is a process. If you haven't gotten anything else throughout this process, please understand it is absolutely possible for you, but you have to be willing to go through the process in order to get there. And the utilization that we talked about earlier, you really want to be between 1 to 30% utilization. Now, that should make sense after all the data points we talked about earlier. What do you actually need to apply? Basic details and verifying details about you and your business. Depending on your credit profile, there are document-based funding programs. There are no document-based funding programs. Ultimately, and very simple, what that means, the better credit, the more your credit speaks for you, therefore, the less documentation that's going to be needed. Less credit or less predictable credit profile, they're just going to need more documentation in order to verify you say what you have, right? So there's document-based funding versus no document-based funding. There are multiple options to choose depending on your specific scenarios. And when you are looking for capital and getting access to funding, there are 3 C's that you really want to look at. You want to look at credit, you want to look at cash, or your collateral. You either want good credit so that lenders can lend based on your reputation. You want documented cash flow or stable income, or you need some kind of collateral or asset that you would be willing to put up in order to access financing or funding, depending on what area of this process you are in, right? Now, we have covered a lot. I hope you took a lot of notes. In just a moment, we're going to go in just a couple minutes, we're going to go to Q&A so we can clarify. So the reality is you've learned a lot. And there's really 2 options from here, right? You can take everything you've learned today and you can go and do it yourself. And the reality is, if you do, you'll be better prepared than a large majority of people out here who have no idea of anything about this information. Or you can let our team guide you every step of the way. And if you do that, here's a couple things that you get, right? You get a personalized audit. You get a customized funding sequence based on our experience. You get expert strategy, structure, and support, and you get access to our proven network and resources. Regardless, the biggest thing that I want everyone to do here is take action. Whether you do it yourself, whether you do it with us, doesn't matter to me. I just want to see you take action on something to get your funding process started, right? Either way you choose, you now have a roadmap. The only question is, really, how fast do you want to move? Do you want to go through it on your own? Or do you want to work with an organization who has been doing this for almost a decade? Now, again, I'm a very transparent person. I like, if you haven't learned this from me yet, I like to set all of the expectations on what it's like to learn and work with us. So a lot of people at this point, they say, hey, Dorsey, I would love to work with you. I would love to work with your team, but I'm sure it's just, thousands of dollars in order to get started, right? The way that we work is I'm not a fan of over-promising and under-delivering. The way that we work is on a performance. We are a performance-based industry or a performance-based model. What that means is we deliver the results first, and then we get compensated for the results that we deliver afterwards, right? So very simply, we don't charge upfront for our services. Like I said, we deliver those results. After we deliver those results, we just like a small tip for our effort. So the way that we work is we work on a 10% performance-based model after you receive access to the capital. Now, some people hear 10% and they're like, man, that is way too high. But here's what that actually means. That means there's no guesswork, there's no retainers, and there's no risk out of pocket, which means we have to put all of our team, all of our support, all of our effort to get you funded and put a lot of time in before we're ever compensated for those results, right? It also means that you get a proven process. You avoid costly mistakes, because in life, if you haven't understood up to this point, it's never really the big things that get you. It's always those small, nuanced things that really have the biggest impact, right? So working with us, you're able to avoid those costly mistakes, and you're able to walk into funding with confidence. The reality is you're not paying for a maybe. You're investing into strategy, results, and momentum, which are only paid after you actually get the results, right? Now, what's going to happen is 7 ways. Christina and her team, they're going to have a chat, a link they're going to put in the chat. If you want our assistance to help you streamline this process, to help you pull your credit reports, to help you understand where you are, to help you understand what your first steps are to get funded. Everyone starts at a different journey, right? That's the most important part. Everyone's first steps is different. Some of you may be ready for funding immediately. Some of you, we may need to correct some things before you can actually get the access to capital that you're looking for, right? So they're going to put a link in the chat. What you're going to do, you're going to click that link. It's going to take about 20 or 30 seconds. You're going to put in some very basic information, and then you're going to be able to schedule with our team one-on-one to walk you through this process. Now, again, I like to set all of the expectations with you ahead of time. So when you click that link and you fill out your information, there are some very important things that are going to happen. So immediately when you do that and you book an appointment with someone on our team, you are going to get an email confirmation immediately. It's very important. If you don't see it, depending on your email settings, it may go to your spam or your promotional folder. So I want you, after you book the appointment, to please monitor your spam and your promotion folder immediately after booking so that you have confirmation for everything that you're looking for, right? Now, number 2, when you get text confirmations, yes, there is someone on the other end of that text. You can communicate with that person. If you have questions, if you have concerns, if you need to reschedule, whatever the case may be, you can communicate with that team. Understand, we are primarily a text-based support system. Now, responses can take. We service a lot of clients. We are a very large organization. What that means is, please do not expect an immediate response. Responses can take anywhere between 3 to 24 business hours. Most commonly, you'll probably get an answer within about 6 hours, right? It just depends on volume. But just understand, responses can take 3 to 24 business hours. Now, the appointment that you are booking when you click that link is a one-on-one. Just like I said, we have a white glove service. You don't have to guess any of this. One of our team members are going to walk you through step by step. So I want you to understand the call that you're doing and you're booking. It is a Zoom. It is scheduled for 30 minutes. And on that 30-minute Zoom call, someone from our team is going to be able to walk you through how to access your credit report properly and all of your business information, right? Now, we run a professional business. We work with real businesses. We expect you to operate as a professional. So, very important here. You must show up on time. If you are more than 3 to 5 minutes late, you will have to reschedule, right? We have a very busy schedule. We have a lot of clients. We expect you to show up on time. And if you're going to need a reschedule, we expect you to communicate ahead of time, right? So you must show up on time and you must be on a computer. My team is going to be walking you through accessing and downloading credit reports and access to information. Really complicated and takes a lot of time on the phone, right? So because of that, yes, you must be at a computer to avoid technical difficulties. And yes, you are looking for access to funding. Just like how I talked about, it must be verifiable on paper. So yes, you must be willing to share your personal and business information with us, and please have it ready ahead of time, right? There is, to answer it ahead of time, no, you cannot give us a general explanation of your business or your credit and expect us to do something. We will not, we cannot. We are going to operate just like the bank when it comes to underwriting your information. So you must be willing to share your credit and business information in order for us to do our job and help you figure out the first steps you get funded, right? Now, with that being said, again, I try to cover as much as I can in as much detail as possible, but naturally at the end, there are usually a couple different questions. So that's what I want to do now is if you have some questions, if you have some concerns, you can come on here and I have about 15 minutes in order to answer questions. Please, if you come on here, just one thing I want to say, please just be mindful of other people's times. You can come up multiple times if time allows, but please let's keep it to one question or two questions max. And then if there's other time or there's not as many people waiting, then of course you can come back up. So with that being said, I am available to take questions at this time. If you'll do me a favor, if you'll raise hands in order to do this, just in case anyone is not familiar with the raise hand feature, at the bottom of your Zoom, there's going to be a react button. When you click on that, you are able to raise your hand and ask a question, and we will answer them in the order that they are received, right? So the first one up is I see iPad. I don't see a name, so I do apologize. But I do see iPad. You can go ahead, introduce yourself, and go ahead with your questions.
Yeah, this is Kima Thompson. I'm not on my original computer. So I know I'm sure you went over this, but I wanted to elaborate a little bit on the aged corpse. I have a LLC that I got back in 2016. It was established, and I really didn't do anything with it. I didn't do taxes or anything. I don't know if I should just start a new one or if I should try to do something with that because it is aged. Just, I've had it since 2016. It could be dissolved. I'm sure it might be. I didn't dissolve it myself, but since I hadn't done anything with it, I'm sure the state probably already dissolved it. So that's my first quick question. And then the second question is, um, should I get the LLC and put it under the business trust, or should I use the business trust to get funding? So those are my two questions.
Phenomenal questions. Great questions. So for age corps, every state, it was established in 2016. That's a great year. That's awesome, right? So you have an age corp already, but every state is going to be a little bit different based on their dissolution. So the first thing you would have to do, if you can access it and use it, I would absolutely use it because you got an age corp that's 10 years old, right? Which means a lot in the financial area. Even if you didn't have a tax, have that tax obligation, which is fine, but you have the age. So if you can activate that business and bring it back active, I would 100% use it for me personally. But you would have to contact your Secretary of State, the state that the business is in, see if that's an option and see how many years ago it was. if you are able to, I would absolutely, me personally, would absolutely reinstate, excuse me, reinstate that entity, and then go get the bank accounts and, you know, legitimize the business, and then leverage, yes, that the H Corp in order to do so. That's the first question. The second question, I apologize, I forgot your second question. Can you repeat it for me?
Sure. The second question was just to would I get the LLC and put it under my business trust, or should I just use my business trust as the business?
Phenomenal. So I covered this a little bit. I can't necessarily tell you what to do because every person is a little bit, excuse me, different, but I can tell you what I would do, right? So for me personally, I like to keep my trust private, right? I don't want any record on a public record of my trust being active in the public record, right? For me personally, I just want to limit liability. So for me, I use LLCs and corporations that own other LLCs and corporations in order to get funding. And then what happens is, for me, there is just a legal agreement between, which is a private agreement between my public entities, LLCs and corporations, which would then pay a management fee to the trust. So you can use your trust. I personally just don't recommend that for me personally. You would have, but again, you would have to make that best decision, but that's the way that I do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course, you're very welcome. All right. It looks like Nikki Parker. Nikki Parker is up next. You can go ahead and unmute.
Hi. I've got on my personal credit, I try like every 3 months to try to get increases. I have two business credit cards. I did a dismal, uh, they're really little cards. And I have not done any increases on those. I'm guessing they're approximately about 6 months old. When and how should I go about trying to get those increased?
So phenomenal question. Credit limit increases. Every bank is a little bit different. What I would say for credit limit increases, some banks are like every 91 days. Some banks are like 6 months. Pretty much every 3 to 6 months, depending on the bank, I'm going to ask for a credit limit increase. So you're
Would I
at six
just
months, I
call
would say.
or do it online or try to do it online? Normally, for my
Um,
personal, I do it online.
So you can do it online, depending on the bank. The first thing is, a lot of times you can't find the information on how often you can do the credit limit increases. So for me personally, I always call. I default to calling personally so I can speak to someone, get as much information as possible, and then apply that. So for me personally, I would call and I would ask the questions that you just asked. So, hey, I've had this account for 6 months. Just out of just wondering, how often can I request a credit limit increase with your company? So that's the first question I would ask. The second question I would ask, though, is there a hard inquiry for me to get
Mm.
this credit limit increase? Because some banks will give you a hard inquiry when you get a credit limit increase, and other banks will not. So us understanding the importance of inquiries during a funding sequence, if you're looking for new funding, that's an important question to ask, because obviously that would be a hard inquiry on your report. But to short answer, I would call the bank to just request that information.
Okay, and as far as certificate of, I can't think of the name of it. Some kind of certificate to verify that it's active. I remember having to get that before, and I think it
Mhm.
expires like every 6 months. So mine should be expired now. So would I have to do that again? Can you think of the name of what I'm referring to?
So they have the reinstatement, they have the articles, which is the articles of incorporation. And then they just have a letter of pretty much verification depending on the Secretary of State. And then yes, you would have to purchase depending on the state. Sometimes though, you don't always need that for a credit limit increase. A lot of times you need that initially to like open up accounts or set up that relationship. A lot of times though, the majority of the time is it's just an initial thing, and it's not like an every time thing.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Of course, you're very welcome. Okay, let me see. I'm looking at the chat because I see a couple questions. So I don't know. Okay, hold on. Ask for credit increase. What is that? Yep. Small business administration. Okay. I'm scrolling back up in the chat, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to scroll back in the chat to see if I can catch as many as I can. Okay. So the first question in the chat was, do I need to create an operating agreement while creating the LLC? That would be my suggestion. Yes. Truthfully, once the LLC is started, you can do an operating agreement at any time. Some banks request it, some banks don't, but just going back to what I was saying earlier, it's better to be prepared and have that information so that you look professional and prepared if they ask you that, because it sounds a lot better than someone asking for an operating agreement and you not really knowing what that is or not being able to provide it. So I would say you can create it. Ideally, yes, you can create the operating agreement whenever while you create the LLC, but it can really be created at any given time. Let's see. What about high utilization? Steve's iPhone said, what about high utilization? So we do have utilization thresholds. If you caught those utilization thresholds that we went through this, you want to be between 1 and 30% utilization. If you have high utilization and that's your only issue, it's one of the easiest factors to work around. Just a little bit of insight about this. Utilization, you need to understand what your statement date is or your closing dates. That's kind of what I mentioned a little bit throughout this process. And then what you want to do is you want to pay down those accounts below those utilization thresholds at that time. If you have the money or the resources available to pay it down yourself, that is great. If not, a lot of times the strategy we use is going to get some kind of cash loan or personal loan to pay down the utilization and bring that under those thresholds and then go over to business funding. Trying to answer that as much as possible. There's kind of just a little bit of a broad question, but I hope that answers. Let me scroll down. Probably missing, how do you ask for credit limit increases? Yep, Nikki, I just answered that for you a second ago. SBA, yep, Small Business Administration. You are very welcome for the information. Are there any types of businesses that banks prefer to fund versus others? Not able to speak live. That was Rashad's question. Generally speaking, so every bank is going to have a different risk appetite. So some banks may say no to certain businesses that really surprise you. Generally speaking, though, the no to businesses or the higher risk. So there's high risk industries and then there's restricted industries. High risk industries are things like trucking and real estate and antiques. Those are what are considered high risk industries. There are certain cannabis has gone over more to high risk. Cannabis has gone over more to high risk, but cannabis as well too. Now, the restricted are usually like adult entertainment, weapons, things of that nature, right? So those are the difference between like restricted versus high risk. I'll go through the chat one more time, and then I will get your question in just a minute, Nikki. Said, I have a question about virtual office. If I want my trust to remain private, does it matter if I use a commercial virtual office versus a UPS virtual address? No, and an address is an address, regardless of wherever you get it from. That just goes more for structure of your paperwork and making sure that your paperwork is aligned. Having an address is perfectly fine, but having that address listed on like a public record with the name of your trust, that's where that's where it could come out of the private sector. Does your business have experience with securing loans for farm-related businesses? I own micro school and we specialize in teaching kids urban homesteading. Yes, we do have experience funding farms. Farms is one of those businesses, kind of going back to the other thing. It's not necessarily a high risk or a restricted industry. It just really depends on what type of financing you're looking for. You say loans, so I'm assuming that you mean like term loans, but sometimes people say loans and they just mean credit. If you are looking for a loan specifically, cash loans are generally heavier documentation. So we can get it done as long as you have the financials in order to support it, specifically if you are looking for a cash loan. What that means is basically proof of income, whether, bank statements, tax returns, different things of that nature. Every lender is going to be a little bit different. Lorenzo's question here, how do you get an H Corp? If you want an H Corp from us, you can reach out to us by filling out the link. Let us know specifically that you want an H Corp. One thing to know about H Corps though, and this is important for me to notate, credit always comes to the foundation. So understand, a lot of people believe that an H Corp negates the fact that you need to have credit, right? You still need to have the good credit, right? The H Corp is a cherry on top. It's not what's going to avoid everything else. So that's why I just wanted to confirm on the H Corp. But so the reason I say that is if you want an H Corp and you have the qualifications on the credit wise, then we can help you get set up with an H Corp. But I just want you to understand, if you have credit challenges, those credit challenges need to be addressed before you get an H Corp, because otherwise you're going to spend the money to get an H Corp and then you wouldn't be able to use it because you still have those credit challenges, right? So I just wanted to clarify that. Nikki, I see you raise your hand, but you also put in the chat. Would you rather unmute and ask your question, or is it the same question that is in the chat? Okay.
It's the same question that's in the chat.
Perfect. So Nikki's question was, Nikki's question was, does utilization on the business matter as personal? My business is maxed out, but my personal is managed. Phenomenal question. So business credit card utilization matters. So we talked earlier about business credit cards, we talked about business loans, and we talked about business lines of credit. Business credit card utilization matters if you are going for a business line of credit or a business term loan. It does not matter per se if you are going for business credit cards, unless you are going to the same bank. So let's say you got funded from Bank A, your business credit card is maxed out, and you want to go and get more funding. You're not going to be able to go back to Bank A and get funded, but if you go to a different bank and you're looking for the business credit card product, the maxed out business credit card is not going to impact you unless you are looking for the business business line of credit or the business term loan. Lorenzo, what does it take to acquire a cash flowing business? It's a loaded question, and I've got about a minute to answer it. So there's a process of due diligence where you have to first identify if acquisitions is something completely new to you. You have to first identify what your acquisition criteria is. So what industries you want to acquire businesses in, what expertise you have, what kind of relationships you have, right? The important part of acquiring businesses is you want to acquire businesses that are either within your skill set, that you can turn over the business, or you have the relationships that you can bring in order to acquire that business and grow that business. An important part about acquisitions, you want to acquire a business that you can implement people or systems in. You don't necessarily want to acquire a job. Everything else is going to be a little bit different based on the acquisition criteria or process to the bank that you are looking for. I hope that answers. Acquisitions is like really, I'd have to do a whole other masterclass based on acquisition, but I did try to answer that as fast as possible. With that being said, I do appreciate you all. I do have to go. I don't see any more hands raised, fortunately, and I did cover the last questions in the chat, so that is always a great thing. Christina, 7 Ways, I appreciate you. I hope that this was extremely valuable, and I look forward to working with all of you very soon. With that being said, y'all have a great rest of your day. I wish you a happy new year, much abundance, many blessings, and let's make it a great year. I will talk to y'all soon.
Yay! Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. We appreciate you every time that you come and pour into the community because we need this information. You're a wealth of knowledge. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all. Y'all have a great rest of your day.
We appreciate you too. God bless. All right, guys. So how did y'all feel about the masterclass and learning about business credit and business funding? Let me know, let me know, let me know. Come off mute, let me know. Okay, somebody said excellent. That Aya. She said, Aya said excellent. Great.
That was
Okay.
just what I needed.
All right. Exactly. Just what you needed. OPM, other people's money, the bank's money. I'm excited. Wonderfully necessary. I love that. Great job. Excellent. Excellent. Great. Very thorough. Great presentation. Good stuff. All right. I'm excited. Okay. I have work to do. Yes, we all have work to do. Okay. It's not only you. It's not only me. It's not only, anyone else. It's all of us collectively, but we're getting the work done. So little by little, it is a journey. So give yourself grace and a little bit of patience. So, without further ado, we do have a live Q&A tonight. It is going to start at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, if you have any questions for me, I am going to be able to answer them tonight at 7 p.m. So it is a separate link. The link is already on the Telegram chat. It is also in the Facebook community, and you're going to receive a text message and an email. So if you're available at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is in about less than 5 hours, then jump in here and we can talk about trust, and I can answer all your questions and we can go from there, okay? So you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you at 7 p.m. Bye,
Yeah.
everybody.